I was recently just reading one of my favorite books called Boundaries. You guys might be familiar with it. It's by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, and I will link it in the notes. It is by far the first thing that I have every client read. It's such a great, just basic understanding of what am I responsible for and what is someone else responsible for. The one that I'm reading aloud to my kids actually is called Boundaries with Kids. Now, my kids are between the ages of 10 and 13. It is so funny to read this to them because it's almost like giving them the opportunity to give me a report card as a parent, and it's not always pretty. I said, well, how do you guys feel like Dad and I are doing with having a firm boundary around bedtime? And they were like, we would give you like a D. And it was so hilarious because I was like, well, what could we do to improve? Like, we obviously need to improve. And they were like, well, we feel like what would work is if you just like told us very firmly that it's time to go to bed and that you wouldn't allow us to get up. Now, of course, we've been around and around this mountain throughout their childhood. It's so funny. Bedtime has just been the thing. It's just been the struggle. But what did that do? It basically gave my husband and I total permission to draw that hard line, and the kids didn't even realize that they were part of this psychological experiment with me. I did not intend for it to unfold the way that it did, but it was so hilarious because then we felt like, well, it's time for us to be super tough, so we'll just do that. Well, hi, if we haven't met before, my name is Dawn. I'm a licensed therapist, a homeschooling mom, and a Jesus lover. And I am here today to encourage you and equip you and empower you, all the things, so that you can actually love tough. And how many of you know sometimes love must be tough? We cannot coddle people into change. We cannot enable people into change. And we certainly cannot manipulate people into change. I feel like you guys would want me to keep going, so I'm just going to keep going even though the lighting has changed like a million times since we've been doing this. So the first truth that I want to empower you with is one that you've heard before on my channel, and that is that only God can change a heart. Only God can change a heart. You cannot change a heart with your manipulation or your crying or your emotional consequences of any kind. We as moms, I think, can fall into this trap where we start to dole out psychological consequences instead of actually giving consequences that matter. There is an impact when we provide emotional consequences to our kids. They do feel sad when they hurt us. They don't want to be disappointing to us. And the more effective consequence is definitely one that causes them pain directly. So I want to encourage you today to let go of any of the psychological consequences that you might be providing for your kids. It's just not effective. It's too high of a cost for your own heart, and it's just not necessary, because really what you can do is draw a hard line in the sand, and then it's their decision to have crossed it. And then there doesn't have to be this high emotional intensity or cost to you. So I was reading this aloud to my kids. I was actually reading the principle of sowing and reaping aloud to my kids. And one of the parents was named Sally, and the other one was named Susan. And Sally in the book decided that she was going to bring all of her kids to Disneyland for the afternoon, but yard work had to be done first by her son. Now, her son, of course, didn't do the yard work. She reminded him. She took on all this responsibility that wasn't hers. So she said, we're leaving at this time, so the yard work needs to be done by this time in order for everyone to go. Well, of course, she nagged, she reminded, she nagged, she reminded. And in the end, when he didn't do it, she, of course, just lost it. She became very upset emotionally, very, very like guilt trippy and manipulative in terms of her psychological place that she was in. And then in the end, the whole family joined in and did the yard work, and they were late to Disneyland, and she ended up bringing the son. So she didn't have the guts to love tough in that situation. She didn't have the guts to say, you know what? You made your decision by not doing what was expected of you, and so you'll stay back and the rest of us will go. And that, my friends, would have stuck with her son way more. But instead, what he learned in that scenario is that, okay, it's not that bad. If I don't do the work, I just have to endure a tantrum from mom, and then I still get to do what I want, and everyone actually does my work for me. And is that what we want to impart to our kids? Is that what we want them to live by throughout their adult life? I am guessing that you're saying a resounding no. Now, in contrast, Susan, who we'll say lived down the street, she had 3 daughters. And she had a similar scenario where she was going to take the 3 daughters shopping during the afternoon, but she had made it clear to one of the daughters that in order to go on the shopping trip, she was going to have to clean her room by whatever time they were leaving. Let's say it was 12 noon. Well, she did not remind her. She did not nag her. She noticed that it wasn't happening, but she decided, it's not my responsibility. She's perfectly capable of watching the clock and knowing what's expected of her. And so instead of taking the psychological route, she simply let her daughter choose. And she did not choose to go on the shopping trip, was how Susan actually ended up in this situation. She said to herself, well, she didn't end up cleaning her room, so she has chosen not to go on the shopping trip. So what she did marvelously in this situation is she allowed her daughter to be responsible for her choices. That choice involved pain. And so the mom, rather than getting all ramped up emotionally, she simply said to her daughter, I see that you've chosen not to go on the shopping trip. The other 2 and I are going to go. We're going to have a great time, and you can stay home, and we'll see you later. It was just very, very clean cut. It was like, you made that decision. You obviously chose not to go with us. You can stay back. We're going to have a glorious time. End of story. And guess what? That daughter learned more that she will take into her adulthood than she ever would through any psychological warfare. She learned, oh my goodness, if I don't follow through on what's expected of me, I lose privileges. I don't experience fun things. I experience pain. I have losses. And isn't that what we want our kids to go into adulthood with? We want them to know that they can't just willy-nilly about their responsibilities. They actually have to show up and do what's expected of them. And we as parents have to have the guts to love them tough in the name of their future. So I want to encourage you right now to grow a little bit of strength, to pump yourself up a bit, and to let your kids experience pain. It might be the greatest gift that you give them, because they don't need to be coddled. They are not fragile. They are capable human beings who are making choices every day, and you want those choices to support a good, healthy future. Hopefully one that involves fulfilling their destiny for God. And how many times do we want them to hear the voice of God and to know, oh, God is asking me to do this, and I want to say yes to that. I want to show up. I don't want to make excuses. I don't want to miss out on what God has for me. We always have to be thinking towards the future. So knowing what's ours and what is theirs is extremely key. This is your second secret, is you have to be so solid in what you own, which is you, yourself, and you, and what your kids own, and that's they, themselves, and they. That is in their hoop, so to speak. Think about it in terms of like a basketball court. Things that would fall in their court would be their homework, their music lessons, their athletic practices. All the things that they're responsible for are in their court. If they choose not to fulfill their responsibilities, they will experience pain, and we need to let them, because ultimately, is it loving to rescue them from pain? I don't think so, because it won't serve them well in their life ahead. And that is my third secret. You have to think about the future. I remember another vignette in this Boundaries book that one of the authors of the Boundary book actually went to a person's house for dinner. And after dinner, the mother sort of like disappeared, and she was in the older son's room cleaning up. She was like throwing away trash and picking up dirty laundry, and she was doing all these things, and she thought it was actually pretty like noble of her. And they must have been pretty good friends. And so the author ended up striding into the room and he said, like he looked perplexed, and she stopped what she was doing. And she was like, what's that look about? And he said, I just feel bad for Johnny's future wife. And so she was just stunned because she hadn't seen that when she was taking on the responsibility for Johnny's mess, that she was actually setting up another person in his life to take on this responsibility that wasn't hers either. Really, in that moment, she had this revelation like, oh my goodness, this isn't loving, this isn't fair, this isn't kind, this isn't good parenting. She realized the error of her ways. And so I want to encourage you in this secret as well. If you're struggling with a decision, gosh, is this too harsh? Think about the future. Think about the behavior that you're trying to correct in your child and ask yourself, will this serve them well in the future? Does this set them up for success in school or university or a job or as a father or a mother? Place that behavior in that role and see if it still fits. And you know what? I have found that when I do that, it gives me the guts to follow through. Because at the end of the day, we have to know that we've loved our kids well. Not that we've enabled them well, not that we've rescued them well, but that we have allowed them to know what their responsibility is and that they will experience pain if they don't fulfill it. That is key to producing healthy families and citizens and fathers and mothers and students. We all have to know what we're responsible for and to be able to fulfill that role for God. And that is what is the key to creating strong people that are principled and hardworking. We want to shape this society in that direction, and we know that it starts with our kids. And so I want to encourage you to take a bubble bath. Don't clean up Johnny's room. Don't do things that you're not responsible for because you think it's loving. It's not. I want to free you up to just fulfill your responsibilities. Let the rest go. Don't even need to get emotional. Just simply deliver the truth, which is when they don't fulfill those responsibilities, they're making a choice not to experience a privilege, and that was their decision. So let them experience the pain, Mama. Let them have it because it will serve them well in the future, and it is the only thing that will cause them to change.